Hey, welcome to Victims and Villains. If you guys are new to our content, we create content like what you're watching right now, simply to educate and engage individuals like yourselves on mental health awareness through pop culture. My name is Captain Nostalgia. I am a writer, podcaster, and the director of our film festival, Horrific Hope here. If you guys would like more information about that, links to our social media, how to support us financially, who we are, and most importantly, our mental health resource library. All of that is going to be in the show notes below. Now, I am joined by my abyss-gazing co-host on this one, Mr. Mark Moore, as we talk about Dairy. I don't know how to say it.
Dario Argento.
Yes, that one. His return to the horror genre in Dark Glasses, which was the secret screening from this past Saturday, but it will be dropping on the platform officially on October 13th.
And that platform would be Shudder.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is a Shudder exclusive. If you guys don't have Shudder, like always, there's going to be a link in the descriptions below where you guys can sign up for 7 days free trial. Mark and I love Shudder. It's probably our favorite streaming app that we have.
Shudder's great and cheap. It's like $5 a month. So,
Shudder.
but have you seen any Argento movies to begin with, or was this like your first intro into his world?
I have never seen him. It has been on my list for a while. I know me and you had talked about doing a couple Argento episodes on for abyss gazing, and it is still something that I would like to do down the line. Ironically enough, I own one of his movies, but I've never watched it.
Which one?
I own Sleepless, which was a 2000 or 2001 thriller that he did.
Okay.
So this was my introduction. So I'm going to be coming at this from a completely fresh pair of eyes.
Okay. So that might explain some comments that were made before we started recording this morning.
So before we jump into it, Dark Glasses, it tells the story of a call girl who gets hunted, and as a result of the hunt becomes blind, and then it ends up continued to be hunted throughout the film, now in her new state of vision
Impaired.
vision impaired.
Yeah, she ends up
So
blind as a result of some of the things that happened while being chased early in the movie. And the Asian kid was the kid of the people that were
who she
involved
hit.
in the yeah.
So I don't want to give too much away. We're gonna keep this as spoiler free as possible. But Mark, what are some of your spoiler free thoughts on this one?
It's an Argento movie. If you're familiar, that's why I asked, is this the first one you've seen by him? If you're familiar with his movies, everything about it has that Argento feel. Absolutely everything, camera, style, the way it plays out, the traditional effects, everything is Argento. You could go back and watch Inferno. I think it was called Phenomena or something like that had Jennifer Connelly as a kid in it. Tenebria, all of them, they have that Argento feel, and it's another Argento movie. It's just story wise, plot wise, it's not one of the best.
So I guess let me talk about it from that perspective, because not having a background with Argento, I am coming at this completely from the casual audience.
Yeah.
Which is where I think some of the viewers might actually kind of, I don't want to necessarily might also be in my shoes and might come at this film and say, is this worth my time this spooky season? And I want to say that this movie the first act of this movie starts off like a call girl slasher.
Yeah.
And I was here for it. And then at the end of the first act, there is, as we said, our main protagonist, Diana, she ends up getting hunted by our antagonist, who's never named. Uh, but he essentially goes and he's like trying to like run her off the road, and as a result, she ends up going blind. She ends up killing a man, putting a woman in a coma, and essentially almost making an orphan out of a 7-year-old. And the rest of the tone of that movie shifts from the rest of it moving forward.
So, did you catch that he was more than just stalking her?
Yes, which all right, so like if you're even gonna like point that out, like that is kind of where I feel like this story is pretty lackluster. Like that is such a petty motivation. Like the motivation for the killer in this movie is about as lackluster as the last two
Yeah.
acts.
Yeah, and like I said, it's a typical style-wise movie of Argento, but it's just story-wise not the best in his collection. Um, he's got some interesting visuals in some of his other movies that don't make it into this one, like lighting and scene wise and things like that. Um, I really liked Inferno. So if you go check that one out, you'll see what I mean. But when you, it's got all the check marks of an Argento movie, with the exception of a good story. That's the only place it was lacking. And it felt kind of generic. It reminded me a little bit of what was it, Jennifer 8 with um Uma Thurman, where she was blind and had somebody stalking her and stuff. That's kind of what it reminded me of at one point.
Now, like, don't get me wrong, this movie had potential. Like it really wasted it. I feel like
It's
what
it's not bad. That's the thing. It's not bad. It's just not great either.
I would argue that this movie is one of the worst horror movies we've gotten this year. And I say that because once there is that transition in tone, it no longer feels like a horror movie on paper. So I'm gonna say it doesn't feel like a horror movie on paper. It doesn't feel like it on screen because it essentially kind of becomes this like
It's almost
misfit toys family drama type thing.
it's almost more of a suspense or a thriller than anything else.
Yeah, so in theory, the notion of a final girl being blind and being stalked by a slasher, it it seems like it has real potential, and I feel like that's kind of what breaks my heart most about this movie is that it never like comes into that full potential.
Yeah, it's you have an interesting opening with the way it starts out all the way up until the accident. Then it slows way down because they have to, just the way the story is, without giving anything away, they have to. You've got a girl who's gone from seeing all her life to being blind. So you have to have the story of her adapting to it and the kids involved and all that stuff. So it goes from what could have been something really interesting to just slowing the pace way down to do character building, which you have to do in most movies, but
Sure.
it was such a drastic change of pace that I think that's where it ultimately gets hurt.
Yeah, and I think in the long run with what you said earlier about this movie not necessarily being flat out terrible, but also not being like just the best movie that he's done, it feels lackluster because I remember the reason that this movie was put on my radar was because how big of a deal it was that Argento was
Yeah.
returning to the horror genre for something like 15 to 20 years. And this being his return feels really lackluster. Now that said, like I think there's a lot about this movie that is worth praising. I think the acting's solid. I think the set design is good. The score was fine. I felt like it got a little bit overly repetitive towards the last act. How'd you feel about that?
It's an Argento movie. That's how
Oh,
I
so this is
felt
a
about
this
that.
is a trademark. Fair.
It's kind of like what is it? John Carpenter and his MIDI music in all of his movies.
That's
Same
fair.
idea. It had the same style score that he tends to have in his movies. It had the same camera style and shots and angles that he always uses. Everything was there for just all the checkbox of an Argento movie. It just the story didn't develop very well at a decent pace to keep you interested the whole time. Again, it wasn't bad. It wasn't great either. If you're a fan of
Yeah.
Argento, you'll probably enjoy it a little better than like you, who's never seen anything by him.
I don't even know if Argento fans would like this because I watched this right before we started recording, and I had heard like whispers about like what other people thought. Like I typically don't pay attention to critics, but this movie was in theory a big deal. Again, it's
Yeah,
Argento returning to the horror genre, so like I
it
would check
didn't
out
live
like
up to the hype.
yeah, like I think I read like a couple of reviews from like Bloody Disgusting and like Dread Central and like just a couple of like notable like horror outlets. And again, yeah, it just like it fell real flats for a lot of people involved.
Yeah, yeah. It to me would be like the insomnia of the Christopher Nolan movies. It was okay. Wasn't
Yeah.
great. Wasn't bad. It was okay.
I
I I
I will say
enjoyed it,
though,
but
yeah, I will say the practical effects in this I really did enjoy. I think you get a really stunning opening like showcase of the practical effects, and then you kind of get them sprinkled throughout. I would have probably enjoyed this movie a little bit more had it had a little bit more of those practical effects and a little bit more of that gore.
yeah, and if you go back and watch some of the older stuff, you'll see a lot more of that. So it's just it didn't live up to his library almost and the hype that was behind it for him returning to horror.
Yeah.
Because one, it didn't even feel like a horror in any way, and the story was just mediocre. So
All right. Well, let's go ahead and run this through our Rorschach rating scale, and jump into some mental health. Mark, what is this movie going to rank for you on our Rorschach rating scale?
3 out of 5. Not good, not terrible, but watchable.
I am going to go a little bit lower than you. I'm going to put this at a 2.5 out of 5. I agree with pretty much everything you said. Like it's not terrible. It's not it's literally middle of the road.
Yeah, it's okay.
So, before we jump into our mental health moment, remember you guys can stream Dark Glasses exclusively on Shudder beginning October 13th. And if you guys caught it this past Saturday, October 1st, on the secret screening that Shudder TV did, let us know what you guys thought in the comments below. Do you guys agree with us? Are you guys trying to fight us on our opinions on it? Let us know. But for if you guys are new to our content, mental health moment is where we take a theme of mental health and we talk about it from the movie which we're reviewing in hopes to deconstruct the stigma surrounding mental health. And for this one, I feel like the depression or kind of the switch of having to kind of like learn something new with Diana's character being blind for 2/3 of this movie and kind of like as you said, Mark, like her kind of having to like learn to adjust. There was a lot of depression and there was a lot of kind of mental anguish that her character goes through, and I think it's a reminder that um sometimes when life presents obstacles our way that we're not entirely prepared for, that braving the storm is well worth it because there's a there's a scene in the first act when she still has the sight, and as we've established, she's a call girl. One of her clients established, she says, you're a strong-willed woman, and in that you're kind of like that's the personality that she has for throughout the remainder of the movie or for the kind of beginning of the movie, and then having to have her go through this character journey, having to essentially reclaim that strength. And I just want to encourage anyone watching this right now that if you've recently kind of gone through a storm in your life, whether it be depression or you feel like you want to kill yourself or addiction or whatever the storm is, to hold on and be strong.
Yeah, and something it's I'm partially deaf, so I fall under the hearing impaired stuff. Most people don't notice, and it's just because I've adapted to it for being so long, and I think it's because it's a new experience for her in the movie is why it's so depressing. Like if I had had this now, if this had started now or a couple years ago, I'd probably be going through the same thing, especially because I love music and movies and stuff. Um, so it comes with there's it's kind of strange for me though because of that. It's something I learned to adapt to having a hearing impairment.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like I can't like directly link directly to that. But a couple of summers ago, like I'd gone through something very similar where I had kind of pushed my body a little bit further than I knew it was capable of. And I actually lost hearing in my left ear for almost 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And like I could not hear at all. And I was like, how am I going to podcast and how am I going to review movies and this and that? And kind of just learning to adjust to that. And also, having gone through other changes that have also yielded things like depression or that effect on my own mental health, community I feel like was a really vital thing to have. When I knew I was moving to Virginia a couple years ago, I think what really made uh, that move a whole lot easier what was the fact that like I had people that were in my corner to support my decision and kind of walk me through and then be there if I needed to talk.
Yeah. And it's with the podcast and all the work you've done over the years that would could cause an issue.
Yeah.
Because there's some movies over the years where they talk about the sound and how it sounds like you're in the middle of events, and when you've got like for me, it's one side that's deaf or impaired. It's sometimes you don't get to experience that kind of thing.
Yeah. So this is your reminder that even if your circumstances have recently changed, that it's not the end of the road
You
to
would,
remain
yeah,
to be strong.
it may suck right now, but things improve as you adapt and adjust to it.
Yeah. So stay with us.
Yeah.
And as always, there are links in the show notes below to our mental health resource library. Uh, but that's going to do it for us talking about dark glasses on this episode. Uh, on this movie review. Make sure that you guys hit that subscribe button. And if you guys haven't already, please check out and sign up for Shudder. Dark Glasses comes out October 13th on the platform. And yeah, have a good night, guys.